We are here, you are there, with Allan Beswick.
Good evening. How are you? Hey, intake grand. Good evening, I'm Allan Beswick. This is the Allan Beswick Late Night Phone-In. If you want to join us, that's good. We want you to. The telephone number, and you can only use the phone. We don't do the other stuff. We don't do any of that social media palaver on this programme. The telephone number is 0800 218 2255. You can talk about absolutely anything you choose. I don't. Jane's producing, Marlon's taking your calls, Tom's working the buttons, and I'm Beswick, and I'm the one doing the chatting, as it were. So, 0800 218 2255. And now we know, don't we? Now we know. Not casting aspersions or pointing fingers, but now we know. Whilst you watched through the window of the care home as your mum died, wondering in a confused state why you'd stopped coming to see her, and worried that you'd stopped loving her, staff in number 10 Downing Street were gathering together to drink champagne as they said goodbye to their departing colleagues. I don't know whether that was illegal or not. There's a committee going to make that decision. But if politicians of any hue at all, whatever their party, whatever their stance, whatever their position, if politicians of any hue want our respect, the least they could do is to pretend to try to earn it. But they do pass some rules and regulations, of course. Under proposed new rules, people who graffiti public buildings will be required to repair the damage within 2 days or face serious penalties. I do hope that includes Banksy, who appears to daub his scrawlings wherever he fancies. And a few historians and veterans groups and the like are whipping up a grumble because the Home Office is considering using an old RAF camp to house asylum seekers. The camp in question is Scampton. That's the one where the dam busters of World War II fame were based. Now, I don't want to stir the pot about asylum seekers. That's an issue in itself. But isn't it time that we as a nation heeded the words of Basil Fawlty? Don't mention the war, which incidentally ended 78 years ago. Yes, those men in the plains did heroic work, as did many, many thousands of others, and many, many thousands lost their lives. But we move on. We're a species. We move on. And isn't it time we started to think, hang on a minute, 78 years ago, we can't hold World War II in aspic, can we? The leader of Plymouth Council has resigned because he agreed to the felling of an awful lot of trees. Meanwhile, log burner owners up and down the land applaud him because of all the trouble they have getting wood. And this week, King Charles was told that currently France is no place for a royal. The president thereof was concerned for His Majesty's safety, perhaps remembering his people's historic treatment of their own royals. Macron just couldn't bear the thought of Charlie being lost in France. 218 2255 to join us here till 1 o'clock in the morning, which will become 2 instantly, because the clocks go forward this evening. You remember? Spring forward, fall back. That's the mantra of the clock palaver. Anyway, 1 o'clock becomes 2 o'clock instantly. So when you wake up tomorrow at 9 o'clock, it'll actually be 10. Unless you've already done your clock, in which case it'll be 9, when you'll really be waking up at 8. If that makes sense to you, you're a better man than I am, or even iller than me. 0800 218 2255. Let us begin. How do, Ray?
Hi, Alan. I'd like to talk about mental health. I think, well, I believe there's some people in society that don't really understand mental health, and I think what do you think?
Well, there are some people in society who don't understand people who are suffering a mental illness, of course. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean when people with mental illness, I don't know, do bad things on the streets or something, they think they're just being bad, but they don't realise that it's their illnesses that makes them do bad stuff.
Well, it's impossible as a passerby to distinguish the reason or the background of an individual who's behaving in a non-societorial way. So it's very difficult. If somebody, I don't know, smashing up a bus shelter, you don't know whether he's doing it because he's paranoid, suffering from schizophrenia, or whether he's just smashing up a bus shelter because he's a little thug. We don't know. So it is hard for people, just passers-by, as it were, in the street, to grasp the motivation behind an individual's behaviour.
But I do believe that people who are mentally ill, when they're up in court for doing bad things, they go to prison, and I always believe that if they go to prison, it's not always good for them because they're very vulnerable if they're going into prison, if you know what I mean.
Indeed, it is definitely the case that we have an awful lot of people who suffer from a mental illness in prison. There aren't sufficient places in mental health institutions or hospitals or what have you for people who have done things that society didn't want them to do. So you've got to do something.
But do you reckon in the next 10 years, people, or the next 50 years, people will start understand and go, oh yeah, the guy's mentally ill, or do you reckon society will still be the same thing in the next 50 years' time about mental illness?
Well, it's impossible to predict the future, but if we look at the past 50 years, society has come a long, long way from where it was 50 years ago in regards to mental health. In those days we had dirty, great big institutions where people were put and remained there for life. Now we don't. Some people say it would be good if we did, but we don't. The Risleys and the Winnocks of this world are gone, and many say that's right and proper. So it's impossible to predict what will happen in the next 50 years. We have got better. If you look back to 100 years ago, they were kept in chains. 150 years ago, they were ticket people, rich people paid good money to go and see them in their cells, as it were, where they were locked away without decent food, without hardly any food anyway. So we've come a long way, and hopefully that progress will continue. But who can say?
I mean, I'll say one thing though. I just believe that the police don't really understand it. The police always go use excessive forces on them, on people with mental health. If you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. It's impossible to say that they always do X. The police don't get enough training. It's not me saying this, it's even the police saying this. Don't get enough training on how to deal with people who have a mental illness. But it's also very difficult to work out who does and who doesn't have a mental illness. All the police see is the behaviour that's taking place, and they have an obligation to protect the rest of society against the behaviour that society doesn't want. And the reason for that person doing what society doesn't want isn't really an issue for the cops. That's an issue for the mental health practitioners, of which they are ludicrously few.
Yeah, they should really do a documentary about it, people, how people with mental illness are very vulnerable when they're going into prison. They should do documentaries about that, shouldn't they, really?
Well, they should, and they have. There have already been radio and television documentaries about the way that people with mental illnesses struggle in the prison environment.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, I'd say that is true. But I think as a society, we need to be more really understanding. I think the police need to be more trained about it. I think.
Well, you agree with the police in that. The police definitely want more training in how to deal with people who have a mental health problem. The difficulty is that if you're a police officer or a sergeant on the desk, the custody sergeant, and one of your officers brings in a man who's just done something that's socially unacceptable, or a woman, the sergeant doesn't have a lot of options. He may well, or she may well think, let us take this person to a mental health institution where perhaps they would be better served. And then somebody says, well, there aren't any. Now, at that point, the police have to make a decision. What do? We just turn them out again and say, well, it's not his fault, he can go out and he'll do it again, or she'll do it again. Or do we put them into the criminal system, which is the only one that's available to them? I don't know the answer to that. I know it's a serious question.
All right, that's fine. And thanks for talking anyway.
It's my pleasure. That's why I'm here. Have a good night. 0800 218 2255. If you want to join us, feel free. Talk about anything you wish. How do, Malcolm?
How do, yes. Partygate is back in the news again, I gather.
Indeed.
There's been some discussion. I mean, the former Prime Minister who was interviewed is trying to rewrite history, in my view, because on the one hand he's basically saying he did nothing wrong, but on the other hand, I know you've just mentioned the police, he didn't say that to the police, because he admitted to the police that he'd done something wrong and he paid his fine, which he would have had the opportunity to appeal that fine. So there's a complete contradiction in terms. I mean, they keep talking about it breaking the rules. That's the term that's being used quite a bit in the media. But it wasn't the rules when it came to people who were being arrested for various offences under the COVID legislation. It was the law. So why is it the rules for the politicians and the law? No, it's about the use of language. He broke the law. He paid his fine. Now he's saying that he's perfectly, he did nothing wrong and he didn't lie to the Parliament at all. I mean, this is pure nonsense. So it's not been a particular...
Well, hang on a minute. There are two different things here. There's no escaping his titular admission of breaking the law by paying the fine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he lied to Parliament. So you've got to go through his statements in Parliament and elsewhere, but specifically in Parliament, word by word, to assess whether he did actually lie. To speak an untruth is not necessarily a lie. To say something that you believe to be true that is later shown not to be true doesn't make you a liar. Makes you inaccurate, perhaps, but that's not a lie. So it's very hard to pin him down, and there's a group of people who are going to attempt to do that.
Yeah, but clearly there is a clear contradiction there, isn't there? Anyone can see that. On the one hand,
you may well say that you can see it, and there's now going to be a parliamentary committee to decide, or there will be a parliamentary committee in the process of deciding whether they can see what you say you can see.
Yeah. But going more generally on the issue of COVID, it's not been a particularly good week either for those who support the continued vaccine policy, because on PMQs, a Conservative MP, I think his second name was Wright, asked a question to the current Prime Minister about compensation for vaccine injuries. Now, the response was that he would look into it. There's £120,000 on the table for those who've died, or officially there is. this Conservative MP was bothered about it because one of his constituents was not getting the money. And then it's now emerged that the Telegraph is reporting that they've increased the number of people who are administering the scheme for the £120,000 compensation for COVID-related deaths and serious injuries from 4 to 80. So that was almost certainly a response by the current Prime Minister to the problems associated with the vaccine, from 4 people administering the scheme to 80. So
well, no, that's not the case. He's decided to increase the number of people working on the cases because the number of applications are considerably more than was thought there would be or thought that there was. And so you're increasing the number of people to deal with the claims doesn't necessarily mean that all those claims are valid.
Well, okay, you could. That's a valid point. They may not be valid, but the very fact there are so many of them shows something. And
well, no, it doesn't. The fact that there's a lot of them claiming doesn't mean that all those claims are valid.
To claim that there's a huge number of fraudsters
I'm
after
not,
the £120,000 money.
I'm not trying to claim anything. I'm challenging the word you have used, that it is obvious, because there's a lot of claims, it is obvious that they're all right. And in the case of saying, would there really be fraudsters taking money off the government? I'm afraid fraudsters took billions of pounds off the government, much of which will not be retrieved. So to say the fact that there's an awful lot of people, are they all trying to fraud the government? Well, if you'd have asked me that a year ago, I'd have said no, but the evidence now is they were. So,
well, you're talking about different types of fraud.
No, indeed I am. I'm not breaking them down into categories, Malcolm. you raised the view. Your view seemed to be that because there's a lot of them, they can't be crooked. Yes, they can.
Not all of them, though, because that MP...
I didn't say all of them. I didn't say all of them. Malcolm, I do not say all of them. Any more do I believe that they are all crooks than I believe that they are all ill. I don't know. Well, I'm prepared to hear your guess. Pardon?
No, the vaccine injuries are real things, and there are a lot of.
I'm glad you've used your medical knowledge to convince me of that. You do have medical knowledge, I'm sure.
I've got scientific knowledge, and
No, I asked you whether you had medical knowledge.
I see Malhotra will discuss it.
Malcolm, let's just say yes or no. Have you got medical expertise?
No, I've got scientific expertise.
And like a good scientist, you don't like to end with one word. But your answer was no. And you may well have a scientific expertise. I don't know.
Well, you should know, because you can look on the PhD on the Manchester University website.
That is how I would find out. What I just said is accurate. I do not know. You're telling me I could find out. I'm telling you I can't be asked.
Right, fair enough. But even so, I'll still give my views, which are that there are a lot of people who've died not from COVID, but from the COVID vaccine, and it's a huge number of people.
You're a scientist. You're a scientist, Malcolm. You keep telling me you're a scientist. Give me your evidence that they died of what you said they died. Give me your evidence. Don't say there was a lot of them. Give me your evidence. I don't want anecdotes. Give me your evidence.
By Andrew Bridges in the House of Commons.
Give me your evidence. Andrew Bridges has not got scientific qualifications. Give me your evidence.
My evidence.
Get off. Get off. Get off. 0800 218 2255. The world is full of people who know. The trouble is, they don't even understand the question. I have no idea whether people have suffered at the hands of COVID vaccines. No idea at all. I don't even know whether the vaccines worked. I've no idea. I have to rely on people who have expertise in that field. Malcolm does not. He constantly comes on and tells us he's a scientist, but he's still prepared to operate his opinion on the basis of guesses. 0800 218 2255. Want to join us? You can. We don't mind, even if you're barmy. Scientific, but barmy nonetheless. 0800 218 2255. We're here till 1. Singers to kick us off tonight. Both of them brilliant. 0800 218 2255. A quick look at the morning's newspapers. That's tomorrow morning's. The Sunday Times. We mentioned this story the other week. A woman who has a disability shouted and gesticulated at a cyclist who was on the footpath, the pavement. And the cyclist ended up falling in front of a passing car and was killed. And the woman was given a jail sentence. Her family are saying that jailing the disabled woman for the cyclist's death is wrong, say her family. I don't know. What do you say? Putin reckons he's going to put nuclear weapons in Belarus. He keeps waving, I won't say rattling, but he keeps waving the nuclear option, doesn't he? He keeps suggesting, not saying, I'm going to nuke you, but saying, well, nuclear, you're doing it with the tips of your shells and all that caper that have got uranium tips on them and therefore are, in a broad sense, nuclear. So he's giving the hint that nuclear weapons may be used without actually saying, yes, they will. And also on the front page of the Sunday Times, strip searches of children as young as 8. Shocking findings of report into police. Keep me awake, says the Children's Commissioner. Dear God. 0800 218 2255. How do Dell?
All right, Alan.
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, what I want to talk about is I was homeless.
Before you do, Dell, can I get you to turn your radio or television or whatever it is in the background that's got the programme? Well, whatever it is, can I get you to turn it off for the purpose of the conversation?
Right, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Right, what it is, Alan, is I was homeless and they put me in a night shelter, and then after the weekend in the night shelter they put me in a guest house, and it's costing the Warrington Council £450 a week, for me being in this guest house. And they said there's a telly provided, a microwave, a kettle, a fridge. Well, the fridge doesn't work. The microwave don't work, but we're getting £450 off our local council.
Have you spoken to the local authority who are funding it and told them that those elements are not working?
Yeah. And they said I need to speak to these here, but
they said what? I'm sorry.
Speak to the people, the guest house.
The owners, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm scared if I speak to them, they could just evict me, then I'm homeless again.
Indeed. but have you spoken to the council?
No, this was only Friday just gone. I'm contemplating going in on Monday.
That's probably a very good idea. If the council are paying for it, then the council are the people who can say to the landlord, hey, you need to provide these things. It's part of what we're paying for, so you need to provide it.
All right, then. Thank you very much for your time, Alan.
It's all right. And good luck with it. And
right, thank you.
If only more councils would do that for people who are homeless. Good to talk to you. 0800 218 2255. The Sunday Telegraph tomorrow morning. European judges may be overruled on Rwanda deportations, says the Telegraph. Welfare concerns flagged over a school head. This has got interesting. The people that go around, Ofsted, who go around and check all the schools and then tell the headmaster you've got one of these 4 levels, good, bad, bloody awful and brilliant. I don't think that's the technical term, but those are they. And a number of school heads are getting quite uppity about it. And I seem to remember when Ofsted came into being, I think it was during Margaret Thatcher's reign, because she was trying to break the strength of teachers' unions and started to... We used to put teachers on pedestals, which is possibly not a good thing, I mean, my teachers were all on pedestals and they were brilliant. But we used to put them on pedestals. They were important parts of our society, and that gave them a certain power which the then Prime Minister seemed not to want them to have, and started to erode the respect we held teachers in, until we've got to the stage now where they are struggling against being examined by people who can effectively wreck the reputation of the school with one report. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, why should teachers not be examined and tested for their merit like the rest of us? 0800 218 2255. I'll do Louisiana.
Good evening, Alan. It is Louisiana here. How are you this evening?
Awfully well, thank you.
Good. Alan, we all know that your time with us now is finite. It's drawing to a close. I've been thinking recently, I have this feeling that I had when my grandparents died, when I thought, I wish I'd asked them this or that, things about their lives. Anyway, I thought I might ask you a few questions, Alan, so that I don't have any regrets, or rather so that I don't have to say, I won't have to say, I wish I'd asked him this or that. So, first of all, Alan, your time in the army. I think I remember you once saying, but I could be wrong, that a man can leave the army, but the army will never leave a man. Would you say that's good, or would you say it's bad?
I think it's just how it is. I mean, it's neither good nor bad.
For you
then,
require.
I don't regret a moment of it. The 180-degree questions are very difficult to answer. I have no idea whether being a former military person has been good for me or bad for me. I learned a lot of things that have...
What would you say was the most valuable thing or skill that you learned in the army? And do you still use it?
Well, in a way, yes. I was a radio operator, and guess what I'm doing? But I don't think that's the issue. It's hard to say there was any skill. I learnt to touch type in the army. I still use that. So
that's really handy, yeah.
Very, very handy, yes. I used to be able to type 35 words a minute, providing I was typing what I was hearing in Morse code. I can't type at that speed anymore, but yes, so I learnt that. I learnt how to fend for myself, which my parents started the education of, so it's impossible to say.
Did you learn shorthand?
No.
At all? No. Okay. That's quite a handy thing. Now, another one. I am willing to admit I misheard this or have misremembered this story, Alan. It's something to do with your time as a nurse, and I think possibly, again, it could be something I've misremembered. During your training, I think, a dilemma that came up with you or your colleagues. I think that you said there was a quandary in which you or your colleagues were faced with a decision that had to be made to keep alive a pregnant woman or a man who had had an accident of some sort. Do you remember that?
I do. It wasn't my quandary. I was merely a witness at the feast, as it were. As part of my training, it was in the days when patients were put on things in those days called heart-lung machines. A A&E doctor had to make a decision, and the decision was he has two patients, both of whom are severely injured, very severely injured, and required the benefit of a heart-lung machine, of which there was one, and the doctor had to decide who he put on it, and the options were a pregnant woman, not sufficiently pregnant that the child could be born alive, not at that stage of her life, I don't remember the exact weeks and all of that, but very, very severely injured, and a young man with a very obvious fit body from the shape of him, and the doctor had to decide which one he put on. And in an instant, and it was an instant, he decided that the young man goes on the machine. And his reasons, and you have to make the decision. Someone's going to die that night, and you have to decide who. And his explanation was, my job is to save lives. I can't save 2, possibly 3 even. So I have to decide which one is more likely to survive what we're going to do to them. And he said the man, that particular man, in his view, had a stronger chance of surviving than the woman. So he put the man on. We all thought he'd have put the woman on. We're just student nurses. We all thought the woman, because that's what sentiment says. And he's not a sentimentalist, he's a doctor.
Yeah. Okay. Allan, music. You seem to be a man who does not follow the crowd in many ways. I think that can possibly be said in the case of music too. I'm just wondering, have you ever heard of, now excuse my pronunciation here, Jan Garbarek?
No,
he's
so.
He's a Norwegian saxophonist, and he often has a vocal group called the Hilliard Ensemble with him, and absolutely beautiful music. It's just a few weeks ago you were talking about saxophone music. Jan Garbarek, his name is. Okay, it's sort of 12th century, 15th or even 16th century, and he goes around to cathedrals and it's sort of monastic music. And I just wondered, with your unusual taste and unusual likes and things like that, I just thought you might have heard him, but you haven't. Okay, that's the end of that one. So, Allan, let me just have a look at my notes here. When your contract finishes in May, let's just suppose it doesn't get renewed, will you miss routine? Are you a little worried about retiring and losing a routine?
No.
Would you ever consider doing some voluntary work when you retire, Allan?
Considers endeavour, I've no idea. If something caught my attention and I felt like doing it, I might. But no, I haven't got plans to.
No plans. Okay. All right. Finally, so for the last 40 years or so, you've been working on the airwaves, Allan. Do you get nervous before a show?
No.
Did you used to? Have you ever?
Don't think so.
Never.
I mean,
gosh.
It depends on what you mean by nervous. You know, it's...
Heart racing.
No, none of that. It's just talking. Nobody's going to die, you know?
No, I know. But
so one is aware of what one is about to do. And, I mean, I can only speak for me. I have to change from the bloke who washes the dishes and walks up hillsides into the bloke that sits on his bum and talks. That's it. You have to change. You have to put on the mantle, if you like, of the character you've created. But that's it. So there's no nervousness. What's going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? I could say something outrageous, and somebody sues me. Well, so what? You know.
Well, I don't mean nervous in that way. I mean, you know, a lot of people would find public speaking and so on, you know, myself included, quite very nerve-wracking.
Well, it's not public speaking. I'm sat in a room on my own.
Yeah, but it is in a way. You're speaking to the public.
Well,
have you always been confident? Were your parents and siblings confident? Were your parents confident?
I presume so. I never really considered it. My father was a very self-contained individual and was very, confident. I don't know what that word means, really. He was very much his own man and would not do that which he thought was wrong and would only do that which he thought was right. My mum was herself. I mean, it's impossible. I don't know whether they were confident. We never discussed it.
Okay, Alan, thank you very much indeed. I'll call it a day at that. Good to
Have a
speak
good
to you.
night. And in respect of my contract, I haven't the faintest idea of what's happening, and nor should I have. It is due to expire at the end of May. The BBC will decide whether they have further use for me after that, and I will go quietly or stay, according to whatever. I'll do Lindsay.
Hello.
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 Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm just ringing about the clocks going forward tonight.
Yeah.
Why don't they stay forward?
I don't know why. The original thinking was that businesses prefer for them to go forward in the summer and backwards in the winter because it puts the daylight at a different part of the day. For example, farmers in Scotland, they would be milking their cows in pitch black at both ends of the day. There's that sort of thing. But I don't know where it came about. We tried probably in the 70s. We tried not changing the clocks. I think we had 2 consecutive years when we didn't change to British summertime. And it was thought to be a failure. It was thought to be not as good. Kids were coming home from school in the pitch darkness. So they decided to swap it about. It was a long time ago. I don't remember, but they tried it for 2 years and decided, nah, let's swap.
Right. There's just one more thing. I didn't know Pete Price had passed away till tonight.
Neither did I.
My friend told me.
Okay.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, cheers. 0800 218 2255. If you want to join us, you can. Pick up your phone and have your say, and you may talk about absolutely anything. Pete Price, I'm not aware of his demise. Others perhaps will confirm it, should it be necessary. But Pete Price was a fellow broadcaster, worked on commercial radio in Liverpool, and did some work on the telly and things like that, and used to be, if I remember correctly, the compere at the, what was the name of the club in Liverpool? Oh dear, forgotten its name. Anyway, he was the compere there and was very, very successful at it, but the club then burnt down. It was a hugely successful club. I can't remember its name. It was in the centre of Liverpool. Anyway, there you are. Again, I say I can neither confirm or otherwise the state of Pete Price presently. 0800 218 2255. If you wish to join us, you can. Pick up your phone and have your say. You may talk about absolutely anything. I really don't mind. Never learned how to mind. 0800 218 2255. We were doing the newspapers, and we shall continue on that endeavour by looking at what the Sunday People has to say. Kate Kopp, I fear another Cousins. Quite a lot of people fear another Cousins, of course. The Sunday Mirror, Shirley, I may never go back to Strictly. That's Shirley, is her name Shirley Ballas? I think it was. Anyway, Judge hit an all-time low over vile trolling. She hasn't signed for another series, and the BBC are in high-level talks to keep her on. And, I mean, social media is a nightmare. It really is. It's ghastly. And I know it's got lots and lots of benefits, but it's also absolutely horrendous. People, every one of them a yellow-bellied, stinking coward, but people can pour bile into your life with virtually no chance of repercussions, and they do it just for the fun of it. And some of the things they do are absolutely horrible. For example, if a family has their child die, they get vile emails vile messages about it on social media, and you just think, what kind of a reptile sends messages like that? But they do, and it's just gobsmackingly appalling, absolutely appalling. 0800 218 2255. We just had a woman asking a question about a case that I debated some time ago about a person on a life support machine, and there's been a chap in the paper this week, and he was talking about his distress that his mum, who was fatally ill and unconscious following a stroke, was put on what was then called the Liverpool pathway. The man was outraged that his mum had food and drink withdrawn and then lay dying for 28 days. That's an extreme case. 28 days is a long time, but that's how long it took. She was unconscious. Whether she felt anything, we have no way of knowing, but all the evidence is that she did not. But he did. He had to effectively stand by and watch his mum starve to death. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to have happened. Of course it is. It's a diabolical thing to do to a person. No doubt about that. It is an horrendous way to bring about the death of an individual. My question's this: what's the alternative? What's an acceptable alternative? Keep people alive artificially, because we can with all the machinery, keep them alive, which could be for years, decades even, or find an acceptable process by which we can end their lives, thus pulling them out of their misery. How do we do it? What is the right way forward with that? 0800 218 2255. I'm going to talk to Tracy, then to Richard, then to you. But first of all, we shall enjoy the glorious sounds of ABBA. 182255. If you want to join us, you can. The only Pete Price I can find a story about in terms of his demise is a footballer, former footballer who's died, Peter Price. So I have no further information about that. 0800 218 2255. If you want to join us, you can. If you're able to confirm or otherwise that story, then I'd be grateful for you for doing so. But at the moment, it is unconfirmed. It's just something that Lindsay was told, and we haven't got any formal information on that matter. I'll do Tracy.
Yeah. All right, yeah. Alan, listen. Don't try and lowball me with a dead footballer. If you don't know who to do this, in the conversation, show the dude some respect. You can't go hanging around, and come on. Can I say something, Alan?
By all
You're
means.
not going nowhere. Listen. Do you want to hear this?
Well, go on.
You ready? Right, listen. I've not got the best voice, but here we go. This is on behalf, it's not me, it is me, but it's loads of us, and this is what they wanted me to tell you. They went, babe, we love you so. We don't want you to go. Don't go nowhere. You understand?
One always has to go.
Going nowhere. No.
One always has to go somewhere, but thank you very much anyway.
Oh, please don't go. Please don't go.
Thank you very much, Tracy. 0800 218 2255. I'll do Richard.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
What speed limit do you go from your office when you leave tonight?
Quite slow, really. I just walk across the corridor.
No, I mean in your car.
I work from home.
Oh, you work from home? That's terrible.
I do.
So if you go to Tesco's tomorrow, what speed would you go to?
Well, that depends on what road I was on.
Right, well, in my area, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm sure in Manchester it might be 40 miles per hour. Yeah?
Well, there will be parts of Manchester where that is the case, yes.
Oh, okay, right, it's okay. So, the only thing I can suggest to you, right, if the elected mayor of Manchester leaves, and the reason I'm asking you, how can you be clocked at 78 miles per hour on a 40 mile an hour zone of a motorway, which is to protect, that reason is to protect workers who work on the motorway. And so how can you be clocked? Nobody's putting more. I hope he's not putting our council tax up just to pay for his speeding fines.
Well, I can tell you categorically that he will not be doing that.
Okay. Sorry? So what we should have now is it should be grabbed up now in front of all the leaders of the 10 councils, in front of all their leaders, and explain himself, because all their councils now. I read about the soup kitchen people aren't allowed to park on people's gardens. If you go into a bus lane, if you go into a bus lane on Oxford Road, you're fined and your points. He shouldn't be fit to be to our mayor. He can't preach laws to us. I don't drive, but at the end of the day, if it speed off in a 25 mile and knock a cyclist over or an old lady over, I don't think he's fit to be on there. I think that's your job when you leave the BBC.
What me to be the Lord, to be the elected mayor of Manchester?
Mayor of Manchester. If I see your name on the ballot paper,
I'd rather hang by my thumbs.
What?
I'd rather hang by my thumbs. You know
Oh, that's it. I'm glad to speak to you.
And you. Have a good night. The story that he was dodging around is that Andy Burnham, the elected mayor of Greater Manchester, has been caught speeding, and quite fast. He has an explanation as to why he was breaking that particular speed limit. I didn't notice any explanation of why he was travelling at 78 mile an hour, which is not allowed anywhere on the roads of the United Kingdom, as far as I'm aware. But he was fined in the region of £2,000, which your fines these days are related to some extent to how naughty you've been and how much money you earn. So £2,000 speeding fine. That'll line him. 0800 218 2255. And I'll do Trevor.
Good evening, Alan.
Good evening.
First of all, on the Pete Price story, couple of things to add to that. I don't have a definitive answer, but first of all, the club I think you were reaching for was called the Shakespeare.
It was indeed, yes.
And secondly, Mr. Price earlier today was reviewing the papers on GB News, no less.
Oh, there you are then.
And this evening has a 2-hour music show on an online radio station. Now, to be fair, that may have been recorded. I know not. But if he has passed away, all I can say is it was very sudden, and since this morning, and on balance, I rather doubt it.
Yeah, indeed. I'm in no position to comment either way, of course, but I seem to recall that a couple of years ago there was a play called Pete Price is Dead. Indeed, and he made comment then about it being rather odd seeing his own obituary. Not the first to do so, but yeah, so it may not be unrelated to that, and whoever handed the information to our caller got their information twisted, which is more than likely. It does indeed.
So, a couple of cryptic crosswords for you.
Go on then.
Music associated with the Stones, ? 4 letters.
Rock.
Yeah, there we are. And concerning a seaman who is not at home.
How many letters?
5.
5. Seaman.
Do it in 2 bits, concerning, and then a seaman who's not at home, he said, helpfully, perhaps.
Yeah, or not. No idea.
About, or AB out.
Oh, AB being able-bodied person. Okay.
Right. Second thing, sorry, I've got some kind of alarm going off that I've obviously misset, so I apologise for that. Right, second thing I was going to say was I had what I might call a hallucinatory experience on Thursday, and no, I hadn't been consuming anything particular. I was watching a Freeview channel, and up came Till Death Us Do Part, from March 1967, the Easter special, called Till Closing Time Us Do Part. And it was set in a pub, it was set in the pub, and it had an extraordinary group of guests, including Arthur Mullard, Jimmy Tarbuck, Kenny Lynch, Joan Sims, and Ray Barrett from the Troubleshooters, all in this pub. And it was largely a kind of discordant sing-along, Alan, punctuated with exchanges of abuse and a certain amount of vaguely humorous banter. But the hallucinatory part of it was not even just that, but the particular TV channel that was showing it is not the most accomplished at presentational skills, shall I say. And, of course, on the BBC, it didn't have a commercial break, because that was the BBC. But on Freeview, it did. And after the break, I thought, this is awfully familiar. And then it finally, it takes a while with me for the penny to drop, as you may have realised, Alan. And then it occurred to me they were just playing the same segment again that they played before the advertising break. So we got the same 15 minutes twice, if you see what I mean. So that was just amusing and a bit odd, I thought.
One wonders. It's bizarre. It's all done by computers, so they've not a clue.
Indeed. I don't think there's a human being sort of twiddling dials these days, is there really? Anyway, so that was...
I used to do a programme on 5 Live, well, I didn't actually, it was on Radio 5, its predecessor, the late night chat show. Look where I am now. Anyway, we used to go down to London, we used to have a group of guests, 5 or 6 guests around a table, and we'd talk for a couple of hours from, I think, 11 till 1 or something, and one of the guests was Johnny Spate, the writer.
Oh, right, yeah.
And obviously all the guests asked him about Till Death Us Do Part and its racism and all the rest of it, and he put up a very good explanation. All I'm doing is showing you what goes on in the world. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just showing you what goes on. And he did all that, and then we got into the second hour, and he never asked any questions. He just sat there and said nothing else. He said his party piece, and that was the end of it. And Chaz and Dave rang in and says, has Johnny Spate died? He's not spoken in this hour. So we thought that was funny.
Quite so. A couple more quick things, Alan. King Charles III's visit to France has been called off, and I have to say, in the days before it was actually called off, having seen the scenes in France, as it were, I thought King Charles arriving and going to a lavish banquet, apparently at Versailles, might not be the most sensible thing to do. So
they were oiling the ropes on the guillotine, I suspect.
Quite possibly.
With his head.
And of course, we also got the coronation coming up. It's getting ever closer. And I was delighted to see a major retailer advertising kids' coronation celebration pajamas. And I thought, that's absolutely what the kids would want. Coronation pajamas.
God almighty.
Anyway.
There was a lovely story about the coronation that Prince Albert of Monaco accepted an invitation to the coronation before he was even asked.
Oh.
And if he does come, one wonders how he gets his jewellery through the airport scanner. Or is that a different Prince Albert? Who knows?
Who knows indeed. And the final thing I wanted to do was have a bit of a whinge, and I thought, who better to whinge to than Beswick, really?
Indeed, I can go with a whinge.
It's about standing charges for electricity.
Right, yes.
People will be aware that the government, late in the day, announced the £2,500 average cap would be continuing for another 3 months. And people might have felt that would mean no significant changes to their bills. But depending on how much electricity they actually use, it might mean a significant change to their bills. And I will briefly explain why. Notwithstanding the continuation of the guarantee, there are large increases in standing charges, around about 25%. And it's kind of compensated by a small decrease in the unit rate. But I'll be ending up paying almost £5 a week just to have an electricity supply before I use any electricity. And for people perhaps on their own or in very small properties, that is particularly significant, really. And people who are low users, as Martin Lewis and others have pointed out, will be considerably disadvantaged by that. And the other thing is, there's a very large variation between areas as to what the standing charges are. And Merseyside and North Wales are lumped together. I blame North Wales for this, obviously. But Merseyside and North Wales are lumped together, I think because of the historic ManWeb, and you, I think, trained for ManWeb at one point in your illustrious career.
My very first job, yes.
Yes. But ManWeb, of course, was Merseyside North Wales Electricity Board. And the pricing relating to that area has stayed in that Merseyside and North Wales. So people on Merseyside are paying a lot more in standing charges than other parts of the country, and one has to wonder why, I suppose.
Indeed. I've no idea why. But it is true that the increase in standing charges affects poor people more, like any other charge really, affects poor people more than it does the wealthy, because of the proportionate element, but also they don't have any means. There's no way of reducing your standing charge. You turn all your heat off, everything. Sit in darkness for the rest of your life, you'll still get your standing charge, and it'll still go up. The introduction of the standing charge was because people didn't want to pay in their bill for the capital cost of all that it involves, digging up the roads and all that palaver. So a rich person who uses gas and electricity any way they feel like gets a bill of $5-6 grand a year, and part of that, say 1% of that, pays for the infrastructure. And he said, why am I paying all this money for infrastructure? The infrastructure to my house is no more expensive than one going to that little poor person's house down the road. So it was separated.
Yes.
And, the element of that is, the consequence of that is poor people end up paying proportionately more.
Yeah. Sadly so. Well, thank you for letting me having a whinge anyway, Alan.
My pleasure. Have a good night. 0800 218 2255. How do Glenn?
Hello, hey, Barry.
Very well, thank you.
What is on there about Putin and Russia? It is a worry for everyone that's going on. Can you see an end in sight this war on.
In sight?
Are you... Yeah, right. Are you Supreme Court going to get Putin of a war crimes on?
Well, it wouldn't be... No, the European Court wouldn't get him for war crimes. If any court did, it would be the International Court, not just the European one. And are they going to get him? Well, I suspect not.
What threw me on is all about using nuclear weapons.
Well, no, he's not.
So you say he's not got nuclear weapons, yeah?
No, I didn't say he's not got them. I said he's not said he's going to use them. He's allowed people to deduce that for what he's said, but he's never made a direct threat to use them.
Has he gone into a NATO country, yeah?
No.
Right. So, can you see a peaceful end to this war on?
Well, there will be a peaceful end because every war has what can best be described as a peaceful end. Otherwise, it'd still be going on. And it will be a negotiated settlement at some point.
Because obviously, more and more people get killed.
Yes.
And Putin, he's on about nuking the UK. He's threatening to.
Well, no, he hasn't threatened to.
Yeah, go on. What has he said then?
Well, he's said that he has the weapons to do it. He's never said that I will do it. He's never said I won't. But that's not threatening to do.
Well, I think this is a very serious situation. And I think President Putin is a very evil man. And he must have planned this. What is it? He must have planned this for years and years.
I don't know whether he's planned it for years, but he will certainly have planned it. And by all accounts, it's not going anything like he thought it would do.
What I'm saying, did the intelligence services know this would happen?
I think the intelligence services were aware that it might, particularly when he amassed his forces on the border of Ukraine. But they can't know. They can't know what's in his mind. They can only know what he is doing. And then they have to interpret what he is doing and come to a conclusion that they can accommodate. So he amassed his forces on the border and said it's just an exercise. We are not going to invade. We are not going to invade. And I suspect the security forces and the intelligence forces thought, well, maybe he won't. I don't know.
Well, we are always from with COVID and the lockdown, and thousands of people dying. What next, Sam?
Well, everybody's going to die, Glenn.
What I'm saying, how are we going to see the end of this war?
Well, we are going to see the end to this war, but when? I have no idea.
What is it? Putin wants Ukraine. Is that why he wants Ukraine? Is that why he's done this?
Well, by all accounts, I only know what I've read. By all accounts, he believes that Ukraine is legitimately a part of what's described as Greater Russia. And he believes it to be part of Russia, or he claims to believe it to be part of Russia. And as far as he's concerned, he is merely bringing Ukraine back into the Russian fold, as it were. Now, in some of the places on the borders, where he's crossed over the borders, in some of those places, the majority language spoken was Russian.
I don't understand what he's trying to do.
Well, what he's trying to do is to to absorb Ukraine into Russia, and he thought he would get away with doing it quite quickly. He's done it previously elsewhere, and he thought he'd get it done quickly. It's turned into a rather protracted war, which I don't suppose he planned for.
So what do you think is going to happen?
Sorry?
What do you think is going to happen in the coming months or years?
I've no idea what's going to happen. I don't think there's anyone alive who knows what's going to happen. I know what will happen eventually, and that is that the war will stop. But what position the world will be in and what state that part of the world will be in at that time, no one can know. It can only be a guess. He might get fed up and leave the Ukraine. He might get more weaponry and overcome Ukraine. He might die, and then we wonder who'll take over and what will they do. I've no idea. There are so many options, nobody knows which one will come to pass.
Right, have you on that, Tom?
I'll do my best, and you. 0800 218 2255. Perhaps Putin should them, really. When I'd got all my tomatoes and peppers and a couple of aubergines in the greenhouse, and they were all used, and all I had left was the stuff that's going on the compost heap. I pulled it all up and gave the ground in the greenhouse a good raking. Put in a little bit of compost, to sort of enrich the soil again, and was raking it. And whilst raking it, I managed to shove the handle of the rake through one of the windows in the roof. Fortunately, it didn't shatter and cut me to shreds. It just made an hole. It just broke the corner off at the bottom. So I covered it with a piece of plastic, which I then sellotaped. Well, it wasn't quite sellotape. It was like transparent gaffer tape, about 2 inches wide. Taped it to the window, to the glass. And to be fair, it worked all right. But obviously during the winter, the rain got to it and it began to leak. So it was leaking into the greenhouse. So today, I decided to deal with it, which meant replacing the glass. It's not a difficult job. They come in ready-cut sizes because greenhouse glass is fairly standard. So that was all right. So I got my piece of glass and I took the old piece out and smashed it all up and bagged it safely and all of that so nobody gets cut. And then put the new piece in. And it was a faff. It's always a faff, but that's all. I got it all sorted. Fabulous. Clean. Beautiful. Clean piece of glass. Brilliant. And then it rained. and instead of putting the new piece of glass under the piece above it, because it was the very last piece, under the bit above it, I put it, over the bit above it. So when it rained, it poured into the greenhouse. Unfortunately, it just landed on the soil, so it's all right. There was nothing in it, but I had to go out and do the whole damn thing again. I don't suppose you care. I did at the time, but I don't care now because it's sorted. How do Anthony?
Oh, good evening, Alan.
Good evening.
I tell you what, with your greenhouse, that would have saved you having to go in there to water it. Well,
there's nothing in there at the moment of any merit, but yes. But yes, it usually runs down and goes along the gutter in and into the bin, so I can use that water to water it, use rainwater, but it involuntarily did it for me.
Well, it saves the job, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it does, yes.
Anyway, talking about gardening and people not turning up, this is, again, listening to you and Trevor, And that made me laugh about Chaz and Dave ringing you up saying,
yeah, well, they rang the producers, but yeah, as Johnny Spade died, he's not spoken.
He died. But my grandfather used to work with young offenders in South Liverpool around about 1980, mainly doing painting and decorating and gardening. God knows if they trusted them with putting a greenhouse up. But anyway, one of them was men who mow a front and back lawn for an old deer. And after 3 days, my grandfather went round there and said, "You've done nothing. The grass is still a foot high." John, or whatever his name was. That's just, I'm not too sure whether that was anything like his name. His name might have been Alan or Tony. But anyway, he goes, do you want to get on with the mowing the lawns because the old lady thinks you've died? It must have been in the summer. He just thought, I can't be bothered mowing the lawn. I'll just have a skive off Borstal or whatever it was, and had it kip in the sun. But my grandfather, to be more serious, he said that's how he had to deal with young offenders like that, with a bit of humour. And anyway, the next day the lawns got mowed, and the old lady was happy, and and I'm sure the social services were, and my grandfather was. But I think they were painting lampposts and things like that.
It's a good scheme. The idea of getting young offenders to do community work is, in the main, a good scheme. It doesn't work for everybody. None of these things do, but quite a lot of them ended up getting a sense of actually going out and doing a job rather than something rather less fulfilling. And it worked for many of them. It worked at getting them to see society in a different way and to recognise their part in society. So, yeah, it was a good scheme.
Well, I suppose some of them might have got a trade they could use,
I don't think you could get a trade as such because you weren't there long enough, usually.
Yeah.
It was usually, often it was, look, you can go to prison or you can do community work. In those days, anyway, that was the kind of choices they were given. And many of them said, sorry, I'll go to prison.
Really? Oh, good grief. What have been? Oh, well,
prison,
each to their own.
It's weird, but prison doesn't... Some criminals see prison as part of the job of being a criminal, if you like. It's what they do.
It's their holiday camp.
Well, I don't think we'd call it a holiday camp, but they see it as this is how I live my life, and every so often I have to go to jail, and that's fine. And it's very difficult. Once you've been, I've never been, but once you've been to prison, the fear of going to prison is diminished because, like many other things, once you've survived it, you're not as frightened of it next time.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. It might. What was that? TV series in the 1970s with Ronnie Barker in
Porridge,
and his wife just told all their neighbours and her friends that he'd gone on a hunting trip in Africa for 6 months or something. Loads of nonsense. But I just thought that throw that in as something is a bit funny. But I definitely think it's better for young people to stay out of prison and do something constructive, even if it's sleeping on a back lawn for 3 days.
Well, it's better for some, without a doubt. Others, that really won't cut it.
Yeah. Well, he won't cut it. That's a good pun, there.
Indeed,
think
so.
about it. Anyway, okay. I don't think there's a... I was going to say about how Trevor was saying about the standing charges, and I didn't realise that until I heard him now. And some of these energy companies are the biggest polluters into the River Mersey, or they were, in the 60s to the 90s. And I think they should give people on the River Mersey or around that area a break, a financial break.
In what way would they pollute us to the Mersey?
It's the oil refineries.
Oh, right. So those are the energy people you mean? The oil refineries, of course, they don't have the standing charge. It was. I thought you were still on about the deliverers of electricity and gas.
Oh yeah, no. You've got the same companies now, and some of them who had or do have oil refineries along the Mersey are now energy providers. And it costs a lot of money to clean up the Mersey, these people. I think in the 90s, and it's just me being just trying to be a bit fair, just thinking, well, why don't you give poor people a break, or relatively poor people, because that's what Trevor's point was, You have a small house and you don't use much electricity or gas. You pay a hell of a lot more, relatively, than someone who's in a big mansion.
Indeed, but the dirty great big trench that's been dug and all those lines of cables and all of that, and indeed the production of the energy or the conversion of the energy is costing somebody. Now, who's going to pay for it?
Well, what about the rich guy in the big mansion?
Well, he pays standing charge also. It doesn't cost any more to deliver energy to a rich person's house than it does to deliver it to a poor person's house. It costs the same. Now, why? That one argument is that everybody should share the cost of it. The other argument is the rich people should pay more and thus subsidise the poor people. That's not fair, either, is it?
Well, I don't know. I think what's the NHS all about?
That's done by taxation.
Yeah, but that's richer people.
Well, richer people pay more tax than poor people, but that's done by taxation. That's not done by private enterprise deciding which of their customers is going to be charged the most.
Yeah, well, there's a interesting, but it was an interesting thing. You were have a discussion with Trevor, and it's made me think. But I only heard about it, literally half an hour ago when he was on the radio with you. So interesting, very interesting point. Well done to him for bringing that up, and for you for highlighting it. So, oh, by the way, go on, and I'll say this. I was listening to my Mac Lads album. I saw them in the late 80s, a long, long time ago, and they're guys from Macclesfield, and they recently saved a documentary film about Macclesfield from the late 40s, which people might want to check out. I think they found the only copy, the lead singer, which was a good thing. But the album, I noticed, mentions Warrington twice, at least twice in it. But the songs are so naughty and have so many swear words in, and I think the Mac lads just try to offend everybody. There's no way they're ever going to be played on radio. You know, in fact, I was listening to the whole album. There was only one song without a swear word on it or anything, and I just thought, oh, good grief. But just in case, that's Bitter Thick Crack by the Mac lads, 1988. If you ever that interested, for a sick sense of humour, and mentions of Warrington and Manchester and Liverpool and North Wales, it's all in there, but it's just basically pub drinking culture, smoking, womanising, and you know, and having a go at MPs down south, as they call them. I think that's as polite as I'm going to get.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I'll put it on my list of things to avoid, but good to hear from you. 0800 218 2255. If you want to join us, you can talk about anything. You can give support to your favourite entertainment if you so desire. You can ask me pointless questions, or you can say what's on your mind. And if there's nothing on your mind, well, that's fine as well. We really don't mind, as it were. 0800 218 2255. Calm down again, so that was all right. 0800 218 2255. How do, Katie?
Oh, hello, Alan. Hi. Hi. I wanted to say I heard a lovely record, and it made me think of you and Mike Harding.
Good Lord.
Well, yeah, it's called the Manchester Rambler.
Ah, yeah.
But I've up till this point, I'd only ever heard it by a group called the Horton Weavers. But amazingly, and I've mentioned this to you before, that Radio 3 has gone a little bit eclectic, and I heard it on Radio 3, and it was really, really impressive. It was by Ewan McCall, Peggy Seeger, and their whole family.
Yeah.
And it was, the date was 1983, but I think the DJ said it was written in the 1930s. But my God, you could hear every word, and it seemed, although I've always loved the song by the Horton Weavers, this seemed more impressive and deeper somehow, and more affecting. And I really, really would recommend it to you if you've never heard it.
I know it well. I probably know all the words. I'm not going to sing.
Really? Well, I just thought I'd break all the rules tonight, and, you know, mentioning like a request for you and Mike Harding, and I thought,
it has lines in it such as, "No man has the right to own mountains any more than the deep ocean bed," and it's all about the mass ramble, for want of a better term, on Kinder Scout way back in the 20s. That was what it was. That was the sort of area of society that it was addressing, the fact that people were not allowed on open land. The right to roam and all of that. And it's, I'm a rambler from Manchester way. I get all my pleasures the hard northern way. And I can't remember it all off the top of my head now, but there you are. But the Manchester
Rambler. Was that the same as the mass trespass?
The mass trespass, yeah. That was it.
Yeah, I really was. And you could hear every single word. It really was clear. There was a kind of authenticity about it, which was, I really, really enjoyed. I just thought if you didn't know it, I'd recommend it to you.
It's a good song.
Yeah.
And if I'm right, I think Ewan McCall, who you referred to, wrote it, and Peggy Seeger was his wife, of course.
Yes, and I think it said, and their whole family. So maybe it was their children as well. It sounded as if it was quite a few people singing it, but it really, really was lovely. Yeah.
Well, one of his children, I don't know whether she's on it, but one of his children was, of course, Kirsty McCall.
Yes, yeah. I think he might have had several marriages. I think Peggy Seeger might have. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so Peggy Seeger was his final wife. She was married to him when he died.
Yeah. I suppose, really, I kind of would love to hear it, but I know that you don't do requests. I know you don't mention people's names, and I thought I might go into a completely different register, and I might tell you that I'll lend you my Beano for overnight if you'll play it, or I'll give you my last Spangled, or I'll even give you back the White Holly I robbed off you last year if you'll play it. I just want to break all the rules, Alan, and I hope that you might see fit to play it at some point.
Well, we may. You never know. You never know.
All right. And thanks for the programme. It's lovely. Thank you.
That's why I'm here. Have a good night. I've been over Snowdon, I've slept upon Crowdon, I've camped by the Wainstones as well. I've sunbathed on Kinder, been burnt to a cinder, and many more things I can tell. My rucksack has off been me pillow, the other has off been me bed, and sooner than part from the mountains, I think I would rather be dead. There you go. 0800 218 2255, a folk club staple of yesteryear. And it is a good one, without a doubt. It sums it all up. And it's just about getting out on the tops and getting the cobwebs blown off you, which is free. Often. Yeah. And there's a line in it where the day was just ending. I'm reading it now, and I was descending down Grinsbrook, just by Upper Tor, when a voice cried, "Hey you, in the way keepers do is the worst face that I ever saw." The things that he said were unpleasant. In the teeth of his fury, I said, "Sooner than part from the mountains, I think I would rather be dead." He called me a louse and said, "Think of the grouse." Well, I thought, but I still couldn't see. My old Kinder Scout and the moors round about couldn't take the poor grouse and me. So you see where it was going. 0800 218 2255. It's all about the Kinder trespass, which was, I think, was it the 1920s? Might have been. And from which I believe came the Ramblers Association, which is, well, Mike Harding, who you heard before, was a previous president and is now an honorary president, I suspect, as was, now, what was her name? The woman who was, she was the editor of The Observer for a while, and she was a BBC presenter for a while and was head of BBC Youth, as she always described it, for a while. Well, I can't remember her name, which is a shame, because she also became a great, a president of the Ramblers Association as well. 0800 218 2255. Back to the newspapers for tomorrow morning. The Observer, top Tory MPs ask for £10,000 a day to work. So a fake company, a company was created, and the Observer got in touch with them and asked them if they would do a day's work for them, and they wanted £10,000 a day to work for this fake company. Dear God, that's nearly as much as Lineker gets. Stress from Ofsted investigations linked in Connell reports to 10 teacher deaths. And the Mail on Sunday, Rishi says, that's the Prime Minister, of course, "I will let the victims say how to punish yobs." How would that work? How would that work? Just imagine, I mean, somebody harms your child. You're going to want some horrible things to happen to them if you're that kind of person. Others might say, I'm more forgiving. I'll just forgive him. I can't see Rishi saying, oh, that's all right, then he can go free. It's an extraordinary thing. As soon as we start allowing the victim to prescribe the punishment or even have a say in the punishment, we've turned from handing out justice to giving people revenge. Yeah. I'll do Oscar.
Hello, Alan. So we navigate our way through life as individuals and collectively, and we're faced with having to come up with solutions to things, make decisions about things. And sometimes we're aware that there is a range of possible answers or a spectrum of possible solutions from numerically 0 up to very high, or in terms of philosophies of life, you've got to the left, to the right, this kind of thing. And there seems to be a received wisdom going about in society. We all sort of take this view, and you hear people often say that, well, really what you should try and do is aim for the centre ground, the happy medium, because that's the nicest, that's the fairest, that's the most correct thing to do, it's the most equitable thing to do. But I don't think that's always right, and I think we should be very careful of jumping to that conclusion of thinking that we have to opt for the centre ground or the happy medium. I don't think it's always that happy.
And
sometimes what would be classified as an extreme is actually going to be the best answer. And I think it's very disturbing when you find people saying, well, we have to dismiss that idea because it's extreme. I don't think extremists should be frowned upon.
Well, it depends on what
examples.
Depends on what they're being extreme about.
Of course. But I think there's a bit of a wholesale, across-the-board dismissal of more extreme solutions or more extreme answers to questions. And I just think that we need to kind of culturally agree that we should stop doing that. I mean, we had an example recently of the mayor of London who was at some sort of a press conference or something, was saying that anyone who disagrees with a policy that he was trying to introduce were far-right people. So we see these kind of things introduced as manufactured pejoratives. It becomes something that's said in order to actually put people down, to dismiss people. And I think that's wrong, because sometimes people on the extremes of something are correct. If you say, how many times should I stab my own hand with a screwdriver, and give me an answer between 0 and 100, the correct thing to say, or the most beneficial thing to say for me, would be to say, well, my answer is 0. I want to stab myself in the hand 0 times, not 100 times. And the person who comes along and says, well, you should opt for the happy medium. So if you've got the range is 0 to 100, why not stab yourself in the hand 50 times? That way you're not doing it 100 times, but you're not doing it 0 times. You're just sort of going somewhere in the middle. But the thing is, because what the action that you are assessing that you're considering is something which is harmful, and you're able to identify that it's harmful, then it becomes obvious that the answer is that you shouldn't do it at all. Not that you should say, well, some people would say, well, we should do it this much, or some people say we shouldn't do it at all. So I know what we'll do. We'll go for the centre ground and just do it halfway. If it's a bad idea, then you should say, well, no, we're not going to do it. Should you not?
If it's a bad idea.
What I'm doing...
The problem with the question, if it's a bad idea, we should say we're not going to do it, is how do we judge generally what is a good idea and a bad idea? All we're left with is opinion. And so there aren't many people who think it was a good idea to stab one's hand with a screwdriver. I would say one would be extreme folly. So you don't have to get to the 100 times for it to be folly. The very fact that you do it at all, if you're doing it on purpose, is of itself straight away folly. So it's not really a good comparative.
Yes, I agree. It's not a brilliant example in that sense, but it's a starting point for considering...
I don't think it is. I don't think it really offers anything to the debate of what is extreme and what is not extreme.
Well, what it offers to the debate is to say that we need to analyse things that are being considered and proposed and suggested, and be able to come to some intellectual analysis of whether they are good ideas or bad ideas on balance.
I agree that is a very good thing for us to do as a society, but if you can find me someone who will advocate for stabbing oneself in the hand with a screwdriver, then I will accept that you are correct to use that as an example of extremity or otherwise. But there won't be anyone any rational individual who would argue, yes, that would be a good idea. The only time stabbing yourself in the hand with a screwdriver once is a good idea is when somebody says, if you don't do it, I'll kill you. And then it's made a good idea by the very real alternative. And so it's not extreme any more than it would be extreme if they said 100 times, or I'll kill you. So no, it doesn't work as a measure of extremity, although your hand is of itself an extremity, of course.
Okay. So how about, the example that I talked about with the Mayor of London, that's talking about climate change. So net zero is perhaps an interesting example that we could consider, where it's not quite as obvious as stabbing yourself in the hand with a screwdriver.
But let's put stabbing yourself in the hand with a screwdriver to one side as irrelevant, and then we don't have to go through this whole process of me saying can't have a conversation on that basis.
Which is why I wanted to move to net zero.
Well, please do. That's what I'm suggesting you should do.
Yes, well, that's what I was proposing to do. So what we have is ideas whereby we are now being told that we need to change our lives to such a degree that a lot of the conveniences of life that we've come to enjoy are now things that we are going to have to consider we might have to give up in order to save the planet, except that the science apparently says that even if we were to go back hundreds of years in terms of our development, going back to the Stone Age and all that is an exaggeration, but what a lot of the stuff that we are being told that we might have to do is very retrograde. It's talking about taking us back to a lot less mobility, a lot less comfort in many ways.
I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure that, again, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think the Green Lobby, if you like, I don't think they're saying we should go back to some time in the past. They're saying we should do something now to carry on with our life as a species, and to do so without causing harm to the planet. So they're saying throw away the internal combustion engine. They're saying throw away with the burning of fossil fuels. But they're not saying go back to living a life of penury and pain. They're saying let's live our life differently from now. And there are processes by which that can be achieved. We can still have electricity generated, if you will, by an entirely different process than with fossil fuel burning. And that is a plan. It's not to say let us do away with electricity and just have candles and walk everywhere. It's saying let us get our electricity via a different process.
I think they're looking at taking us back to some pretty feudal times.
Well, feudal is about, we're fairly feudal already in that the government thinks it owns us. I don't know what you mean by feudal.
Grim feudal times is
why is it grim? I drive a hybrid car. If I was able to plug it in more easily at my house, I'd drive an electric one. I'm not sure that's feudal. I'm not sure it's even that much of a hardship. Obviously, if I was going to drive long distances, it would be difficult at the moment because there aren't the facilities to recharge the battery to get me wherever I wish to go, which is why I have a hybrid. But I don't feel as if I'm being punished in some way or going back to a day when I would have to travel to London by coach, dragged by 4 horses, possibly even of the apocalypse, who knows.
Well,
So,
that's
again,
kind of what's a lot of them have that vision in mind as to where they want society to go. They don't really want you going to London. They want you living within 15 minutes of your home.
Well, quite a lot of those people, I live closer than that to my home. I live much closer than within 15 minutes to my home. I actually live in my home. I think you meant
but they want
15 minutes to your work. Well, yes, that's a good idea. Indeed, I even fulfil that obligation. I'm sat at home now working. Now, if I was a farmer, it might be a bit difficult for me to do it from our back bedroom. And if I was, I don't know, a travelling salesman, I might say, OK, well, I'll do that by phoning people up. But if I was a police officer, for example, I might have to travel somewhere. So it's just they're asking us to think about how we live our life and not live it in a way that is expensive in terms of pollution.
Do you think that the majority of the population want net zero and all that it entails?
I sit in this chair and speak to quite a few people, but my ability to comprehend what the majority of the population want is zero. And I'm not even sure that if you went up to people in the street and vox pop them, as we call it in my business, if you went up to them and said to them, do you think we should strive for net zero, they'd ask you to explain what it meant, because I don't think people grasp what the term net zero means. I'm not sure that I fully grasp it. If you said to them, should we do away with the internal combustion engine and replace our motor cars with electric motor cars, I think people would say, well, what difference does it make to me? As long as I can charge the blessed thing to get where I want to go, I'm happy with that. So, do we want wind power? Yeah, of course we want wind power. Why would we not want wind power? It's a lot cheaper. So it depends how you put the question. If you said, do we want to go back to the Dark Ages, I think many people would say no to that.
Well, what is planned is actually quite extensively documented.
Mm.
If you look at United Nations Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, which is now kind of been updated to.
Rather than tell me what the United Nations numbers are, what is it that's been documented, in your view?
Well, 15-minute cities, most people not really having cars, most people not flying around anywhere.
Well, if you talk, and I do, if you talk to people who live in cities, quite a lot of people, particularly in London, don't have a car. Because there's no point. They've got good public transport and they get where they want to go by public transport. And that's less the case in cities like Manchester and Liverpool, but it's still part the case. I mean, when they introduced the Metrolink, the first line of Metrolink, took about 2 million car journeys a year out of the system. Not because people were handcuffed and beaten with sticks or even had their hands stabbed with screwdrivers to stop them using their cars, but they were given an alternative that was comfortable, cheap enough and better. So they chose that. Nobody forces people onto Metrolink.
Well, the plans are including really restricting movement a lot anyway. Whether you'll be able to sort of go around by public transport.
Name me one plan where movement is restricted. You said there are plans in the plural. I'll settle for one. Tell me one plan where movement is planned to be restricted. Just one.
15-minute cities.
Well, that's not a plan. That's a discourse.
Plan. It's happening now.
15-minute cities. Explain what that term means.
It's happening in cities now. People are required to stay within 15 minutes of their home. They're expected to be able to go.
Name the city. Name one city where you are not allowed to travel more than 15 minutes. Just one.
Oxford is one of the places where it's
no,
happening.
It isn't. So no, it isn't. You can travel. Told. You can travel. Well, you're told. Don't listen to idiots. I have to. You don't have to. You can travel throughout the whole of Oxford. You can go from the most extreme part of Oxford to the most southerly extreme part of Oxford. There's no restriction at all. They do provide you with a pretty good bus service so that you don't have to choose to do it under your own steam, as it were, but there's no restriction. There's nobody clocking where you go, oh, by Jove, you're 16 minutes away from where you work. Well, you're going to have to change jobs or move house. No such thing exists.
It's worth keeping an eye on the developments. Obviously,
it's always worth keeping an eye. Oscar, it's always worth keeping an eye. But, you know, you talked about extremism. You talked about we ought to be, I don't know, less radical. I'm not sure what you mean. I know what you sound like.
What do I sound like?
Crackers. Good night. 0800 218 2255. If you want to join us, please don't walk towards, just stay in your home. We can do it by phone. We don't need you to come to the building because of the invention of the telephone, which has helped a tremendous amount. The internet has helped a tremendous amount. Now, if I want to check a piece of information, I don't have to go to the library. I can check on the internet, usually try a few different sources to make sure I'm not being sold a Mickey. But that works. That works a lot. We're all getting, no we're not, quite a lot of us are getting better at using our resources in a more sensible way. Part of that is because our resources are so bloody expensive. Although, to be fair, I filled my car up today and it cost me about £15 less than it did last time I filled it up. No idea why, just how it was. That lady mentioned the Manchester Rambler. It's a cracking song. We might as well play it. I understood why. 0800 218 2255. How do Jacqueline?
Oh, Paradise, good morning, Alan. This is sort of a carry on from that one. When you die and you have to come back as an animal, what animal would you prefer to come back as?
A cat.
I know it won't be a dog.
No, Life of Riley's a cat.
A cat.
Mm.
Well, I can tell you, never come back as a giraffe.
No, I don't think I would.
Because I watched a programme, I was away this week, came back yesterday, and I watched a programme about giraffes. And they were mating. He did his bit, 1 to 2 seconds.
What's
That's
wrong
all
with
it
that?
took. Oh, God. Well, if you're going to... I think she was 14 months pregnant. That wasn't much repayment for a couple of seconds, was it?
Well, you know. I don't know what the norm is for giraffes or humans, as it happens, but...
I reckon, because I had a couple of hedgehogs mating outside my window one day. I was in bed, and the windows were wide open, and I heard these 2 hedgehogs. And I thought, for God's sake, and the noise that came out of them.
Very noisy, yeah.
And they go on forever and ever. I thought, blimey, all right. That's a little bit too much. But with a poor giraffe, a little bit, not enough maybe. Okay, that's all I... Oh, by the way, if you have to live and work and do everything with him, you might as well be in prison.
Well...
If you can't leave your house in 15 miles or 15 minutes or whatever, you might as well be in bloody prison.
Well, certainly it's restricting. I think I'd still prefer to be limited rather than stuck in a prison cell. But yes, it doesn't offer a great deal of comfort to me. This is the bloke who's going to fly on a jet plane to Canada quite soon on holiday, so I wouldn't be pleased. But there you are. To each their own.
Okay,
Have a good night. How do Neil?
Oh, yes, I'd like to talk about Women's Six Nations. I watched they played today. It was England against Scotland and Wales against Ireland, yes. And I love watching it all this. So I watched the England match, and then I turned off after about 70 minutes because they were 55 up. 55-0 was England, yeah. So it's getting. I'm just thinking, why is there so much difference between the standard, if you can say that? Because it's all internationals. I'm just wondering what it is.
Well, it's partly the fact that the Women's Rugby Union is comparatively new sport, and there are not many practitioners. And rather like the women's football, the England women's team does very, very well. This isn't a criticism of them, but they're often playing against people who are amateurs and don't have the training facilities or the training opportunities that the England women's team have. And the same applies to the rugby. I didn't watch the England game, I was busy, but I did watch the first half of the game before it, Wales versus Ireland, and that too had some ludicrously high score, and it wasn't the most entertaining sport, but it's in its early days.
That's what I'm trying to say. If it's so different, if one's winning by 50 points to someone else are anything. I mean, it's not interesting to me, because I like competition.
I think many people would agree with you, but I can remember the days when we had the 4 nations, and then we extended it to the 5 nations in the men's rugby, and then they allowed Italy in, and it became the 6 nations, and Italy were getting thrashed every game.
You're getting trounced,
And slowly but surely their standard has improved because more and more people in Italy have got involved and more money has gone into it in Italy, and they're getting better. I think they're still a long way from winning the Six Nations tournament, but they're getting nearer to winning a game.
That's a good point. Yeah, I never known that because I mean, like, and the coaches are only got, you know, the top coaches are going to go to successful teams, I'm assuming. So, they
go to the place that looks most attractive to them, and that might include money and the like.
Well, of course,
and it might also be a challenge to get a team that's not really very good more organised. You know, one of the things they forget about some of the great managers and coaches is when they come in, they don't just coach the teams, they often change the structure of the what's known as the outfit, if you like. They change the way the club operates so that there's a better opportunity for them to be good. So, you know, it's the women's Six Nations will get better. It will get more competitive, without a doubt.
I was watching it. It was good, yeah. So, but a related joke with that one. As you do for your name. So, why did Cinderella never get to the ball?
Go on.
Because she had a rubbish coach. Thank you.
Thank you. 0800 218 2255. How did Tom?
Hello, Alan. How are you doing? Are you all right?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Right, I've got a question for you. On your Sunday lunch, what kind of potato would you go for?
None. I don't eat Sunday lunch.
Is it not do you not like a Sunday lunch? No.
No.
Well, I'm in a bit of a pickle. So my next door neighbour, Wendy, I'm cooking a Sunday lunch tomorrow, but Wendy's actually she always listens to the show. She's a big fan of yours, and I need to borrow it because I'm doing the Sunday lunch. I've no potato peeler. I need to ask her if I can borrow a potato peeler. So I was wondering, she's a big fan of you. Could you say, Wendy?
No. Good night. Good night. How do, Mike? We don't do requests and dedications and that sort of nonsense. How do, Mike?
Hi, Alan. How are you doing?
Awfully well, thank you.
I'd like to talk about the royal family.
Okay.
Now, I'm not a religious man, but I was listening to the Christmas Day message from King Charles, and it differed from the Queen's message. Now, she always gives a message of hope to the people with mental health issues, problems, everything. And her views were Christian orientated, because obviously she's head of the Church of England. Now, of course, he's changed that in that he gives his message like across the board. What he said was, this is a message to all faiths and none. And I think that really is probably a popularity thing, in the fact that he considers himself as not perfect in his past life, and he's sort of trying to compensate for that, and maybe he needs a bit of a faith lift, an epiphany to find his faith again, as he is the head of the Church of England. And I think that there's that hope has sort of lost in some way, because the Queen was like really had a strong Christian faith and really had a strong message to deliver, especially on Christmas Day, you know.
Well, yes, the Queen was a very devout Christian, and the King is, I'm not saying he's not a devout Christian, but he said before, it must have been a decade or so ago, he said that when he does become king, he would like to be a guiding light for all religions and none. And it would seem that he's doing that now. Because he's not just the king of Christians, he's the king of Muslims and Jews and everybody else, even people like me who haven't got a religion. He's the king of me. So
because we're living in a multicultural society.
Yes.
So, but I think there is a message. Now, the problem is a lot of religions, a lot of cultures put burdens on people. Who've got problems already, burdens on people with mental health issues.
Don't all religions put burdens on people? All of them?
Well, I wouldn't say different burdens. I mean, if we go through to the...
Well, let's just deal first of all. Do you think all religions put some kind of burden on their members?
Well, some religions offer to alleviate that burden.
Let's try again. Let's try again. Do you think... Well, let's go the other way then. Name me a religion that doesn't put a burden, whatever that word might mean to you, put a burden on its flock. Just one religion that doesn't.
Let me see now. Let's go back to where the burden starts. First of all, the burden starts.
Well, let's try and work out what you mean by burden.
Burden is to live a life which is hard to live, because the majority of mankind find it easier to think of bad things and be selfish than to think good things and to be generous.
But don't all people find it hard sometimes to be good and generous? All people.
All people, yes.
And do not all religions believe that the way to nirvana, the way to their heaven, whatever their superior plane is, suggests that these are the rules by which you will gain access to the kingdom of nirvana, heaven, whatever the name? Don't they all put upon you obligations? In other words, you have to behave in a way that you otherwise might not.
Well, the thing is, people naturally can't do that because it's the nature to be selfish.
But does the faith... But does that... I mean, of course it's natural to be selfish. Ask any of the other creatures in our world, and they are selfish. They would rip something to shreds for their benefit. That's selfishness. And we are selfish creatures, but do not all religions attempt to get us to control that selfishness, and indeed, if possible, eradicate it, strive to eradicate it? Do they not all do that?
I don't think eradication is possible. I think...
Well, I know it's not possible. I'm just asking you whether you think that all religions require of their practitioners to attempt it, to attempt to live a decent life.
Yes, but not without support, because...
the support is their fellow practitioners, surely.
Let's go to the Christian religion. Now we have the head of the church, Jesus Christ, and he...
Well, no, I mean, he's not the head of the church. The church is a man-made thing. If you believe Jesus Christ to be the Son of God and all that, then there are a number of different religions within the Christianity that sees him as the thing to worship. It's not the head. They all have a different head. The Pope's the head of the Catholics. The Archbishop of Canterbury is the head of the Protestants in this country, or the Church of England, the Anglicans in this country. They all have a different head.
Well, you have to define what church means. The church started when Jesus said, "Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst." Now, the church started, of course, in the day of Pentecost, where the support was the promise that Jesus Christ promised the world, which was the Holy Spirit. Now, what happened was, when they received the Holy Spirit, that was the support to go in the direction of generosity, love, and to endeavour to be less selfish, to help mankind and support mankind into loving one another and making the world a better place. Now that was where the church started. So what's happened since, of course, is now let's say if you look at the Bible, if you look at, let's go something really diverse, say look at Google. Now if you look at Google and you Google something, it doesn't always give the right information. It contradicts itself sometimes and it gives the wrong information. That's the nature of Google. Now, if you look at the Bible, of course, people say, yeah, the Bible contradicts itself. But what you've got to understand is the Bible was wrote by humans. Now, how you've got to take the Bible is from the start, Genesis to Revelation. You've got to not take the imperfections that are in there. You've got to take the message. And the message from Genesis to Revelation is the love of God to mankind and how God loves mankind and wants to support mankind, to help mankind to be better, less selfish, to love one another and make the world a better place. And that's what the church's message is. Now, that's the message that the Queen was trying to get across to the world. Now, you'll find in a lot of religions, it's oppressive and saying things that man can't achieve on their own. They don't offer hope, they offer oppression, and they say, keep the 10 Commandments, and which nobody can. It's impossible to keep the 10 Commandments.
But are we to say we can't keep the 10 Commandments, all of them, at once, and therefore we must ignore them? Or are we saying that keeping the 10 Commandments is a very, very difficult thing to do, but we will strive to do it?
Well, I believe Jesus said, I'll leave you a new commandment. Okay? And it's a new covenant. And what he said was, a new commandment. Now, I believe he wasn't telling lies, he was telling the truth. He wasn't a liar. He gave a message, and his message with the new commandment was, love one another, and by loving one another, you'll keep the 10 Commandments. Now, that was his new covenant to the world. And to say, right, I'm going to give you hope now. I'm going to go to the cross, and because you've accepted that free gift of salvation, my new commandment is to love one another. By this, you won't be selfish. You'll help each other. You'll help each other's problems. You'll help each other with mental health issues. My yoke is easy, says, my burden is light. I'm here not to condemn you, but to give you life. Now, what he said was, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And that's the hope of many true Christians. There are a lot of false Christians going around.
To come back to your original point, notwithstanding King Charles, but your original point that some religions put a burden upon you, was not the words you just say were the words of Christ, the creation of a burden on his followers, that they will love one another and seek to help each other. Is that not a task? And a task is similarly for a burden.
Only it's a task, but it's a choice as well.
Well, of course, it's a choice. Because if it wasn't a choice, then there would be no point to it. Of course, it's a choice. You can choose to follow the ways of your faith, or you can choose to ignore the ways of your faith, or you can attempt to follow the ways of your faith and fail because none of us are perfect. Well, apart from me. But why should King Charles not give a message to all of his people rather than just a select, if large, group?
The thing is, people want to change. People want to come to the light. But there are those that don't want to come to the light because they are bad people and they don't want.
Well, there are also people who believe that they're already in the light. But I say again, why should King Charles, in his Christmas Day message, say the same thing as his mother when he's not his mother? Why should he continue to speak, if you like, directly to Christians and as a sidebar to the other lot if they can be bothered listening? Surely the king is the king of the whole nation and all its different elements, isn't he?
He is, but he's taken on the role of the head of the Church of England.
Well, you can be the head of something without believing that is the only thing that you must ever speak of.
Yeah, but he has a duty really to, as if he calls himself a Christian, I don't know if he does, but being the Church of England, I imagine that he
well, the faith he manifestly practices is the Anglican faith. When he piles up at church, and we see him piling up at church, if he's going to worship, then it's an Anglican church he goes to worship.
Yeah. Well, that's his role.
Indeed it is, but it's not his only role. He's also the king of the Muslims and the Jews and the Catholics and the Church of the Latter-day Saints. He's the king of all of them, if they are citizens or subjects of this nation. And why should he just say, behave like a good Christian? And if you're behaving like a good Christian, then quite frankly, you're behaving like a good Muslim and a good Jew and a good Church of the Latter-day Saint. Mormon, I think it's the abbreviation. So if you behave like a good Christian, you're behaving well, and each of the faiths want you to behave well.
The problem with the faiths, of course, a lot of them have diverted from what the origin of the faith.
Mike, I hate to disappoint you, but Christianity is a diversion from Judaism. Christ was a Jew.
Oh, yeah. That's right. And when...
but when you say some of the faiths are a diversion, well, Christianity is. So if you're saying that, they're not as good because they're a diversion, then I'm sorry, Christianity's a diversion, led by a Jew.
Well, the Jews are the earthly people of God. They're a very, very special race. the Jews. And
well, it's a faith. I prefer, we're talking about faith. Let's not get into races. It's a faith. And the Jewish faith is a very honourable faith, as indeed is Christianity. And I've got neither of them. As indeed is Islam. As indeed is the Church of the Latter-day Saints. They are all fine, upstanding faiths.
In the Jewish faith, of course, in the Old Covenant, they were judged by the Ten Commandments, and of course they had their traditions and ceremonies, which
as also does Christianity. As also does Christianity.
Well, what I said before, Jesus offered a new covenant, which is not taken up by.
Well, let's get down to this. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. The Jews were, like the other major religions, an Abramovich faith. I think I'm saying that word correctly, but I may not be. But they're a faith based on the life of Abraham and what follows. And they believe, the Jews believe, and believe that one day the Messiah will come. The Christians believe he's already been. That's the difference.
Yeah. The Jews will be saved. Definitely.
I think I heard a senior religious individual on the radio in the week who said Jews, Christians, they won't be saved for being a Jew. They won't be saved for being a Christian. They won't be saved for being a Muslim. They'll be saved on the basis of how they've behaved. And the question was asked during this discussion, can a person who doesn't believe in God enter the kingdom of heaven? And the answer was yes. You go to heaven on the basis of how you've behaved as a human, not which group you joined.
Yeah, but you've got to look at, you're looking at the yardstick of the goodness of mankind. You're looking at the human yardstick. There's God's yardstick, which is a lot bigger.
Well,
and
we cannot hope, any of us, to achieve the behaviour that is equal to the decency of God and Jesus or any of the other prophets.
There is a hope.
We can only strive to be the best person we can be. And the question, when asked of a senior religious person, can a non-believer, and in other words, someone that doesn't believe in God and therefore can't believe in heaven, can that person enter the King of Heaven? The answer was yes. Their Christianity won't get you into heaven. The way you behave will get you into heaven. I'm fortunate and I know there isn't one. I'm sorry?
The hope is offered, and the hope is offered because man knows that he is weak regarding being good, regarding being selfish, regarding caring for other people. Man has always been weak because man by nature is selfish. Now, there is a hope. Now, you go from what the Old Testament days, the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments was made so that people would know how they fall short of God's standards. Now, as I say, I'll go back to the new covenant where God says, well, we've got John 3:16 in the Bible. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, never vision with it, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. So that's where the hope is. And
well, I think if Adolf Hitler believes in God, I feel sure that believing in the God ain't going to get him in heaven. Mike, we've spent some time talking about the King's Christmas message. There'll be another one. There'll be another one on the 25th of December. Let's see if he's paid heed to your demands. Have a good night. How do Jessica?
Well, the great thing about the 10 Commandments, there are only 10 of them. And there's an awful lot that ain't covered in them, lad.
Yes.
Mind you, I never coveted my neighbour's ass.
No, no,
If you saw my neighbour's ass, you'd know why.
No.
Anyway, what I want to go back to is what you said when you wanted to come back as a pussycat. Well, you are aware of what most responsible owners do with the pussycats when they take them to the vet. And I think you might be better coming off as a young bullock, so you can stay in the field for heifer and heifer and heifer.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Bye, love.
Have a good night, Jessica. How do, Brian?
All right, Alan.
Very well, thank you.
I spoke to you the other week. I come from St Helens, and Warrington had won the first game. And I said to you, looks like they're getting a good team there at Warrington. Now he's got his own way, the coach. He had put up with players last year, which were still under contract. He's got his own lads in now. And you said, oh, we'll see, we'll see. 5 games into the season, they've not lost.
Right.
What do you mean, right? What was it last night? 38-0.
I've no idea.
They've won again. I wanted to bet on them for Win Challenge Cup, and they're only offering 3-1 for them Win Challenge Cup. Now that's a bit ridiculous because they've not won it for a while. And you've got Saints, you've got Wigan, but they're thrashing teams. Thrashing teams, Warrington.
Good.
So, good. As a typical Warrington fan, you're keeping a little bit quiet.
Well, I don't really follow it anymore. I don't go to the games anymore. Pardon?
I say you come from there.
I do come from there. Indeed, I'm a long way from there, so I don't really follow.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been, although I used to go to Warrington very frequently, I've never been a Warrington fan as such.
Yeah.
I've said this many times before. I would rather watch a good game of rugby where Warrington loses than watch a poor game that Warrington wins. I'm a rugby fan, not a team fan.
Well, my cousin played there years ago. Murphy took him from local team down here in St Helens, Blackbrook, when he was 17. He wanted time for Saints, and Saints offered him $2,500. And Murphy said, come Warrington, I'll give you $5,000. Any car you want from Fords. They were sponsored by Fords then, that was around about 1975. And Murphy took him everywhere. Played for Great Britain everywhere, and ended up at Wigan with Murphy.
Murphy was a hell of a coach, without a doubt.
Oh, he's brilliant, Murphy was.
I interviewed him once and introduced him on the radio.
That was interesting.
Sorry, yeah, he was. But I introduced him as the second best scrum half rugby league's ever had. And he came on and he said, second best? What do you mean, second best? I said, you're the second best. He says, who's the best? I said, Jackie Edwards. He says, that's all right, Jackie's a mate of mine.
Oh, God.
So there you are.
Well, he went to school with my ex-father-in-law.
Mm.
And, they thought
the thing I find amazing is some of the best coaches in rugby union, certainly the internationals, are rugby league lads. You know, Andy Farrell, who's worked magic at in Ireland, and I just mentioned Jackie Edwards. Just mentioned Jackie Edwards, or Sean, his son, is doing tremendous business in Paris, and you just say, and you just think something going on here, you know. And you've got the captain of England, Andy's son, of course, and he's just incredible. So Wigan has turfed out some people who are pretty good at the game, it would seem.
Well, if you look at it now, Alan, rugby union, then rugby league lads are getting into it. They're making them throw a ball out more instead of kicking it all the time, and they're making them tackle proper. They're tackling around the legs more, these rugby union players.
Well, they're having to because of the high tackle rule. It's going to get even more so when they bring in the no tackling above the waist. But
it's crazy that. But
I remember when I first played rugby union, it was in the army, and I've always been a tackler. I was tackling people in the way rugby league taught me to tackle them, because of course in rugby league you tackle them and they stay down because they've got it.
Well, that's it.
But you tackle them in a way that they're going down. people came up and said, "What the hell are you doing?" That was how it is. I said, "No, in rugby league, you might want them on the floor. In rugby union, you want them stood up. We want to take the ball off them." little bit of relearning was required.
Yeah, different rules altogether.
I know. I played a game.
You brought something to my mind before, Alan.
Go on.
When you had that song on the Lancashire.
The Manchester Ramble, yeah.
Yeah, the folk song. And then you said you're going off to Canada.
Mm.
Straight away it came in my mind. I thought, here we go, more folk music. We'll leave Peter, Paul and Murray shortly. I'm leaving on Jacqueline.
I don't think so. Have a good night, Brian. 0800 218 2255. I will tell you this, not with any pride at all. It was one of the worst moments I've ever experienced on a rugby field. I was playing for 8th Signal Regiment in Catterick, and we were playing against another team, a local team, and they were pretty good. And I tackled a lad, and during the course of the tackle, he was going at a fair lick, and I didn't tackle him really. I just crouched down and let him run into me. But he broke his thigh, and I mean, you can imagine he wasn't overly pleased, should we say, and he hollered a lot, understandably, as I would have done if it was the other way around. And about 2.5, 3 months later, we were playing their team again, and he came with them, still on crutches, still not fully recovered, and came over and shook me by the hand and said, "It's just a game." Oh, bloody hell, fine. These days you get sued. Anyway, there you are. I'll do Ted.
Right, Alan, kids. Just to say, flowers, Alan, flowers.
I know what?
Flowers.
Flowers, as in blooms?
Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
Inside them, they've got, like, wax.
Wax?
No, the wax is, like, plastic, like plastic.
Okay.
And you could say that, like, they're making plastic flowers now, aren't they? Real plastic flowers.
Where is the wax in the flower?
On the petal, on the petal itself.
Right. Okay.
And the bees gather the wax.
No, they don't.
Off the petal and build their hives with it.
Mm-hmm.
And wasps build their hives with pulp, with wood and that. But bees build their hives with wax. And wax is like plastic. Now they're making plastic flowers now. But like real flowers have wax in them, which is like plastic. In a way, like,
No.
You wouldn't say that, no?
Well, I don't think wax is like plastic.
It's similarities, isn't it? Flexible on that, and they can bend on that, and you can make things out of it.
Wax is produced, not beeswax anyway, it's produced by bees. They, if you like, it's more like poo than plastic. They excrete it.
No, wax is when they rub their legs against the flower petal, and they gather the wax off the petal.
Okay, well, you believe what you believe.
And nectar is honey. That's where they get the nectar from, the flower.
No, nectar isn't honey. Nectar is turned into honey. It isn't honey.
That's right, yeah.
It's basically sugar.
Well, when they eat the nectar out of the flower and they produce honey, that's their excrement. And they feed the babies with it and the queen. It's amazing, like, that's like recycling, isn't it?
Well, certainly, it's a kind of recycling, yes.
Thanks, Alan, kid. Thank you.
It's all right. Have a good night. Interesting. 0800 218 2255. If you want to join us, you can. It's dead easy. You can talk about absolutely anything. It's currently 7 minutes to 1, and at 1 o'clock you will need to change your clock and make it 2 o'clock, because tonight is the night when the clocks go forward by an hour and thus give us British summertime. Sounds awfully quaint, doesn't it? Well, perhaps it is, but lots of other countries do it as well. But yeah, the clocks go forward an hour. It must be confusing in places like Australia and Africa. Well, Africa's slightly different because it's a series of countries, whereas Australia is one country, rather like the United States is one country. And they have timelines. They have Eastern Standard Time and Western Standard Time, I suppose you'd call it. And that must be a bit confusing. Like when you go on holiday and you travel east or west, and your time clock gets all over the place. Well, mine does. It's just weird. What the hell? 0800 218 2255. Won't actually do any good because it's nearly time to go home. Let's listen to Robbie Williams, because the ones are going forward to twos. That was rubbish, wasn't it? How do you, Mick?
Hello, how are you?
I'm awfully well, thank you.
Very good. Yeah, a friend has been, he's told me about, I haven't actually listened to your show before, but he's been telling me about you for a while now. And he thinks that you'd be interested, it's nearly 1 o'clock, I realise, in my idea, which is to enlighten the world by teaching a simple breathing technique. How does that sound?
Enlighten? In what way would it enlighten them?
Well, let's start off. It's a bit scientific in a way. Are you aware of the amygdala?
Yes.
In the brain?
Yes.
Yeah? The amygdala in the brain?
Yes.
Right. So what happens if, for instance, we're age 4 and we get attacked by a dog, then the amygdala is full of images of the dog. So every time we see, smell, hear a dog, we activate the adrenaline and we go into panic.
We haven't a lot of time, so tell me about the breathing technique.
Well, the breathing technique is called the 5-stage breath. And I've taught it to thousands of people. And basically, I would ask, do you think it's possible to stop your thoughts, to still your mind?
We'll end up running out of time. If you want to just tell me the breathing technique, or if you want to ring me tomorrow night when you'll have more time.
Okay, you're on tomorrow night as well, that's great. So you breathe in, you hold your breath, you breathe out, you hold your breath. Without breathing in, you simply just pull your stomach in. This pushes air into your upper chest. You then breathe that air out, which has now made your lungs as compact as they can be. And then you focus on your stomach and you push your stomach out like the bellows, and it draws air into the base of your lungs. And having done that, you then breathe out by pulling your stomach in, again like the bellows. And what happens is, if you do that, basically, I used to teach it to psychiatric patients, and they might start off with sweaty palms, tightness in the chest, butterflies in the stomach, pins and needles, that sort of thing.
We're running out of time. We've got, people will have to listen to it on the iPlayer if they want to follow it, or you can tell it me again tomorrow, but thank you very much. We're going to run right out of time. I'll say a quick how-do to Noah.
Hi, Alan. I know we're running out of time, mate, but I just wanted to, there's been experiments, and I want to know if I wanted to, ask you, if you thought you could do this, how many, litres of Dr. Pepper do you reckon you could put in your arsehole?
0800 218 2255 is the number you'll need to join us tonight. and we'll speak to Arthur possibly, to Gary possibly, and to you possibly if you ring that number. I've been Beswick, you've been brilliant, unless you're that cretin that was just on. That's the one with Dr. Pepper. Good night.
Tornadoes hit the US state, killing at least 25 people. The storms devastated several rural towns and have left thousands of people without power. Boxing, and Britain's Lawrence Okolie has successfully defended his WBO cruiserweight world title against David Light on a unanimous points decision in Manchester. After the fight, he said he would only have given himself a score of 5 out of 10.
I felt a little bit rusty in there. I was trying to work a jab, started getting a little bit tired, which is not like me. But, you know, after 13 months out the ring and all the stuff that I was going through, it was hard to get myself going. But, you know, I managed to just dig deep and get through.
In football, Wales scored a late equaliser to secure a 1-1 draw with Croatia in their Euro 2024 qualifier in Split. Nathan Broadhead, who was making his debut, came on as a sub and scored in injury time to rescue a point for Rob Page's team.
Quite emotional. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and to score is an amazing feeling, definitely, yeah.
Scotland began their campaign with a 3-0 win over Cyprus. England play Ukraine later today, while Northern Ireland will host Finland. British summertime has started and the clocks have gone forward an hour, meaning the time is now 3 minutes past 2.